What would your younger self say about how your family turned out?
It was Christmas morning, and I was exactly where I'd been every Christmas morning for the past 5 years, sitting on my worn-out gray couch in my two-bedroom apartment on the west side of Columbus, drinking lukewarm coffee that had been reheated twice and scrolling aimlessly through my phone because pretending like I was unbothered and independent had somehow become my yearly ritual. The truth is, I had stopped expecting calls or invites a long time ago, but like a stubborn, half-healed wound, the ache had a way of creeping in when you least expected it. I told myself I was used to it, that the silence was just part of the background noise of my life now, but this year, the silence came with a slap. There it was, right at the top of my feed. A post from my sister Amanda. Matching red plaid pajamas, a fire crackling in the background, all three of my siblings and their overfed golden retrievers grinning like a damn Hallmark card. My parents sat on the couch, beaming like they'd just solved world hunger, while the grandkids, all 7 of them, were lined up like decorative throw pillows. Every year, it was the same curated joy, same tree, same script, same sacred illusion of closeness. But this year, it hit harder because now they weren't even pretending to wonder where I was. I wasn't there. I wasn't even mentioned. No one texted. No one called. No one said, "Hey Lena, we're taking photos at noon. Wanna stop by?" Nothing. I just stared at the photo for a long while, zooming in like maybe I'd somehow missed myself hiding in the background. Maybe someone had said my name and it got lost in the group caption. But no. The caption read, "All of us together again for Christmas. So grateful for family and faith this year. All of us. All of us." I tapped the little message icon and typed out something, erased it, then typed again. Finally, I sent. Did you guys forget to invite me, or was it just easier this way? It wasn't passive-aggressive. It was direct. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. And then, finally, the response came not from Amanda, not from either of my brothers, but from my mother. She wrote, "Sweetheart, we didn't think you'd want to be in the picture. You never really seem comfortable at these things." I sat there staring at those words like they were in another language, like maybe if I blinked hard enough, the meaning would rearrange into something softer, something less brutal. I could feel the tightness in my throat, not quite tears, but that dry, itchy burn you get when you've been punched in the gut and you're trying to stay upright. Not comfortable? Was that the new excuse now? After 42 years of trying to force my way into a family that treated me like the odd-shaped puzzle piece they kept trying to cram into the wrong spot, I was now being told that they had excluded me, not out of malice, but out of consideration for my supposed discomfort. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I didn't remind her that I drove 3 hours last year to surprise them and sat alone at the kids' table while the adults passed wine and jokes over my head. I didn't bring up the time I flew in for Thanksgiving and ended up sleeping on an air mattress in the laundry room because my sister's friend's dog needed the guest room. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, staring at that perfect little holiday lie of a photo while something deep inside me clicked into place, like a puzzle piece finally realizing it belonged to a different damn puzzle entirely. There's a kind of clarity that comes when you realize you've been chasing a version of love that was never meant for you, not really. I always thought if I just made myself smaller, quieter, more agreeable, they'd make room for me. I thought if I showed up year after year, with a casserole and a fake smile, eventually someone would say, "Hey Lena, glad you're here. We missed you." But they never did. They miss my absence the same way you miss an empty chair, only when you need a place to set your coat. I closed my phone, finished my now cold coffee, and walked over to my laptop. I didn't know what I was doing exactly, but I knew I wanted to be seen, not in a loud, petty, fireworks and drama kind of way, but in the kind of way that leaves a mark. I opened a browser, typed a few words into the search bar, and found it, Digital Billboard Trucks for Rent, Ohio. It was impulsive, sure, but not angry, not bitter, just focused. I read through the options. You could book one for a few hours or for the whole day. You could play video, images, slideshows. My mind started building it instantly, a slow scroll of every family photo from the last decade, all the posed moments I'd been cropped out of or never invited to, the birthdays where my seat was left empty, the group texts I was excluded from, the wedding slideshow where I was listed as other relatives. And then one quiet message at the end. Some people leave the family. Some get left out. I wasn't trying to humiliate them. I wasn't even angry, not in that traditional, yelling on the phone kind of way. I was just done playing a game where the rules were always written to keep me losing. If they wanted to keep pretending I didn't exist, then fine. I'd show them what it looks like when I finally agree with them. I booked the truck for Sunday morning, 8 full hours, right in front of the one place they never missed, a place more sacred than birthdays, more obligatory than holidays, First Faith Community Church. The white brick cathedral where my father had been an elder since I was in middle school, where my mother led the hospitality team, and where my siblings sat in the third pew every Sunday, all in a row like they were auditioning for sainthood. The booking confirmation popped into my inbox. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen, quietly absorbing the piece of a decision made without apology. I had spent decades trying to be the daughter who didn't ruffle feathers, who swallowed offense like communion wine and told herself it was just love in a different shape. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I didn't need their version of family. I had my own story to tell. And come Sunday, they were going to see it, every frame of it, playing on repeat in the parking lot of their picture-perfect faith. And this time, my smile would say everything they refused to hear. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was second-guessing myself or because the guilt had started to bubble up like it usually did when I made a decision that might upset someone in the family, but because I was wide awake with a strange sense of electricity running through me, a quiet but steady hum that felt like permission, like something dormant inside me had finally stirred, stretched, and decided it wasn't going to shrink back down this time. I lay there in the dark under my old weighted blanket, staring at the familiar cracks in my ceiling that I'd traced 100 times, and instead of rehashing what I should have said to my mom or wondering how Amanda would spin this in the family group chat, I found myself scrolling through my own camera roll, collecting evidence, connecting moments, and realizing that the Christmas photo wasn't the first time I'd been gently erased, it was just the cleanest cut. It's almost embarrassing, the things you start to remember when you finally stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. Like how, on my 12th birthday, I waited all day for someone to remember, not just call or write a card, but remember, like feel it in their bones the way you remember something that matters, and no one did, not even a passing happy birthday. From my dad when I walked into the kitchen that morning in my pink pajamas. I sat on the front porch with a plate of cake I'd made for myself using a box of funfetti I'd bought with my babysitting money, while inside the house, everyone was watching my younger brother's Pee-wee football highlights on VHS, replaying the same 15 seconds where he almost made a touchdown like it was the goddamn Super Bowl. I didn't cry that day, I didn't have the language for it yet, but I remember staring at the cake and thinking, maybe they'll remember next year, like I was willing to give them another chance, because kids always do. But they didn't. Then came high school, where I somehow managed to graduate with honors despite working part-time at a diner and basically raising myself through a patchwork of late-night studying and cheap coffee, and when I walked across that stage in my navy gown, scanning the bleachers for my family, all I saw was an empty row where their names had been written in permanent marker on my mental seating chart. My mom later said there was a scheduling conflict, that the church was holding a special leadership brunch and Dad couldn't miss it because he was receiving some kind of plaque for commitment to the spiritual development of men, and they figured I'd understand. That word, understand, was their favorite shield. I was always expected to understand, to absorb disappointment with grace, to let it roll off like rain on a windshield. I didn't understand, but I nodded anyway, because I had learned by then that pushing back only earned you more silence, the kind that clings to your skin and stays long after the conversation ends. And still, I kept showing up. I flew home from Chicago during a blizzard for Amanda's baby shower, even though she barely acknowledged me the whole afternoon, too busy posing for Instagram stories and showing off the monogrammed onesies her husband's mother had shipped in from Connecticut. I bought her a vintage handmade quilt that I found in a little shop on the south side, stitched with love by someone who probably didn't have much, and when she opened it, she said, "Oh, this is, like, really unique." with that exact tone you use when someone hands you a gift you didn't want but can't throw away. She never used it, of course. I saw it folded in the corner of her laundry room the next Christmas, half covered in dryer lint and sitting under a box labeled Donate. When I wrote my first book, a memoir that was honest, raw, maybe too raw for their taste, my mother called me at 10 o'clock at night and said, "We're proud of you, but we can't promote it." Some of the content wouldn't be appropriate for the church newsletter. I didn't ask which part she meant, the essay about my eating disorder, the one about my abortion, or the chapter about the crushing loneliness of growing up in a home full of people who only loved you when you were quiet. I just said, okay, hung up, and promised myself I wouldn't care, even though I did. Even though it chipped something away, like every other time they smiled for the camera while I stood out of frame, not because I wasn't invited, but because I was expected to know my place, to sense when my presence made the picture less perfect. So no, this wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the 10th. That's the thing people don't realize about these moments. They accumulate. They pile up slowly, like snow on a roof, each one soft and quiet on its own, barely noticeable, until suddenly there's too much weight and the whole damn thing caves in. And when it finally does, everyone acts shocked, like they didn't see it coming, like they hadn't spent years adding shovelfuls without even realizing it. As I sifted through all these memories, collecting screenshots, old photos, text messages, captions, receipts, literal and emotional, I started to build something. Not a revenge plot, not exactly, but a mirror. A carefully arranged reflection of everything they'd worked so hard to forget. I knew exactly what I wanted the digital truck to display now. It wouldn't be cruel. It wouldn't even be loud. It would be the kind of thing that makes you go quiet when you see it, the kind of quiet that settles deep and makes people squirm in their pews because it forces them to remember. I pictured the screen showing a slow, scrolling slideshow. On one side, there'd be all the perfect family portraits, the Christmas trees, the birthday cakes, the Easter brunches, each one neatly posed, well-lit and missing one thing, me. And then, opposite each of those, I'd show the counterpart, the message that was never sent, the empty seat that was never filled, the voicemail never returned. I'd let the images speak for themselves. No rants. No accusations. Just truth, calmly presented like a eulogy for a version of me they never bothered to know. It didn't feel vindictive. It felt inevitable. They'd taken the same picture every year, and every year they made sure I didn't ruin it. So now I was going to show it to them from the outside, exactly where they'd left me. And this time, I wouldn't be the one cropping myself out. There's a particular kind of stillness that comes the moment after you cross a line you've been inching toward your entire life, not because you're reckless or impulsive, but because something inside you, something tired and ignored for far too long, has finally decided that staying quiet is no longer noble, and swallowing your pain for the sake of someone else's comfort is a game you're no longer willing to play. It wasn't anger that kept my hands moving that night, clicking through old files, resizing images, organizing folders, and building the slow, deliberate rhythm of my little project. It was clarity. Clean and sharp like the first deep breath after a long-held silence, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was creating something not to prove my worth, but to show exactly what had been missing all along. The truck company I found online was run by a man named George, a semi-retired former billboard installer who now managed a fleet of digital ad trucks around central Ohio, mostly for real estate agents, car dealerships, and the occasional political campaign. He sounded like the kind of guy who'd been doing the same job for 30 years and only recently realized technology had shifted under his feet. So now he was trying to keep up by letting clients upload their own content as long as they sent it in the right format and didn't break any decency laws. I called him the next morning, my voice steady, my plan rehearsed, and after a short conversation filled with surprisingly few questions, he confirmed my booking for Sunday morning, 8 a.m. sharp, outside the parking lot of First Faith Community Church. He didn't even flinch when I told him I wanted 8 hours, just said, "We got a spot open. You got your content ready, it's yours." Content. That word felt almost too simple for what I was about to put together. I spent the next 24 hours combing through digital archives, cloud backups, old email threads, and discarded folders labeled with things like Family Christmas 2015 and Amanda's Wedding. I collected image after image of my family smiling in that carefully curated way that suggested harmony, wholeness, togetherness, all the things I knew were fragile and conditional, all the things that had never once extended to me. There were photos of birthdays I didn't attend, reunions I wasn't invited to, Thanksgiving dinners where my chair remained conspicuously absent, and baby showers that took place 2 towns away from where I lived, but somehow I never got the address in time. And there were the text threads too, silent proof of all the times I reached out only to be met with a thumbs-up emoji or no reply at all, messages that said things like, maybe next year, or you know how busy we are, tiny daggers wrapped in politeness, always leaving me to read between the lines. For the truck, I wanted it clean. Professional. No rage. Just truth. I hired a freelancer off a design site to help me lay it all out, a woman named Celia who specialized in memorial slideshows and had a knack for narrative sequencing, which, in this case, meant arranging the images to tell a story without needing a single spoken word. I told her exactly what I wanted, a slow scroll of photographs, family gatherings, holidays, birthdays, graduations, all of them showing the same faces over and over with one very obvious gap. No me. No Lena. And then, interspersed between those images, I added the context. A text message from Amanda that read, "We thought you were out of town," over a photo of her son's 3rd birthday party. An old voicemail from my mother saying, "You don't really like big crowds, do you?" played silently against a backdrop of everyone at church potluck, laughing around a table. There was a shot of my father's 60th birthday dinner, taken at the same steakhouse I'd once suggested for my own 30th, only to be told it was too pricey for a family night. There was an image of Amanda's wedding reception, champagne toasts, white tablecloths, dancing under string lights, juxtaposed with my name absent from the seating chart, a printed program where I was listed under relatives unable to attend. But the centerpiece, the image I chose for the first frame and the final one, was a photo I took myself, years ago, outside that same church. I was leaning against my car, watching from across the street as my family posed for their annual Easter photo on the church steps. I hadn't been invited, of course, but I showed up anyway, just to see if maybe, this time they'd look around and notice I wasn't there. They didn't. I stood there with my coffee and my sunglasses, invisible to them, but in that moment, I took a picture of me, framed in the car's side mirror, smiling bitterly at the scene unfolding without me. That photo said everything. It was perfect. When I sent the final file to Celia and she uploaded it to the truck software, I felt a strange wave of calm settle over me. This wasn't revenge, not really. It was just a correction, an editorial note scrawled across a life that had too often been misprinted by omission. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't breaking things. I was simply holding up a mirror and letting them see what they had built without me. Sunday morning came cold and bright, the kind of Ohio winter morning that tricks you into thinking it's warmer than it is because the sun's out, but the air bites every exposed inch of skin with a reminder that February is never gentle. I parked across the street from the church, in a little strip mall lot that gave me a perfect view of the entrance. The truck rolled in at 7:58, right on time, the LED panels already lit, the images already cycling. The first frame, my mirror photo, flashed onto the screen just as the first cars pulled into the church lot. I watched as people started to turn their heads. Some pointed. Some squinted, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The message was quiet, but it was impossible to ignore. Faces froze. Conversations paused. My mother stepped out of the car and turned toward the truck with her hand lifted halfway to her chest like she was reaching for a necklace that wasn't there. My father stood beside her, his jaw tight, lips pursed, arms stiff at his sides. The truck didn't move. George had delivered exactly what I paid for. 8 hours. Full loop. Maximum visibility. I sat there in my car, sipping gas station coffee, legs folded under me like I was watching a play unfold. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel smug. I felt still. like this had been waiting to happen for years and had finally clicked into place. They had always been smiling for the camera, crafting their narrative, presenting their version of our family to the world, and now, finally, so was I. And this time, there was no way to crop me out. There's a particular heaviness to a Sunday morning in a small Ohio town, especially in the winter, when everything feels quieter than usual, as if the cold has a way of pressing down on sound, softening the air, slowing the footsteps of the faithful as they shuffle from their warm cars into even warmer sanctuaries, holding Bibles in gloved hands and wearing smiles that stretch across faces lined with routine and ritual. For my family, Sunday mornings were more than tradition, they were sacred performance, the weekly theater in which they polished their halos and made certain every detail of their image remained unblemished. From the color-coordinated scarves to the carefully chosen pews to the post-service brunch at the same cafe where the waitress already knew to bring Dad his black coffee before he even asked. That morning, as I sat across the street watching them through my windshield, it was almost surreal how little had changed except now, looming across from their pristine brick church was a slow-moving truck with LED panels rotating through a carefully curated display of omission, absence, and long-overdue truth. The first 10 minutes passed in silence, not the kind born of peace, but the kind that signals the moment just before something cracks open. People walked by, at first not realizing what they were seeing, heads turning back a second time, brows furrowed, whispers starting low and rising in scattered notes across the parking lot. One man, a deacon I recognized from years ago when I still attended sporadically to preserve the illusion that I hadn't drifted entirely, walked up to the driver's side window of the truck and began gesturing animatedly. The driver, a stoic man in a denim jacket and a Cleveland Browns beanie, clearly George's employee, maybe a nephew or just someone who owed him a favor, shrugged and pointed to the paperwork on his clipboard. Whatever was being said was lost to me, but the tone was unmistakable, confusion curdling into discomfort, discomfort hardening into concern, concern sliding quickly into outrage. My mother stood frozen on the sidewalk for several seconds, her gloved hand still clutching her small purse, her lips parted just slightly as if she meant to say something but couldn't quite find the shape of it. My father, more practiced in his response, walked her toward the entrance, one hand on her back like a shepherd herding the flock, and as they passed beneath the slowly shifting images of smiling family portraits where I had been invisibly scrubbed from existence, I caught a flicker of something in her eyes, recognition, not just of the photos themselves, but of what they meant, of what they revealed, and perhaps most unnervingly, of what they didn't hide anymore. Inside the church, I imagined the sermon went on as usual, because that's what churches do when faced with discomfort. They continue, they hold tight to the script, they pray harder, sing louder, smile wider. But outside, people came and went, and each time the screen looped, more eyes were drawn to it, more whispers turned into conversations, and I saw at least 3 separate people take out their phones to record it. One older woman, her heavy coat wrapped tight and her Sunday hat pinned perfectly in place, crossed the street to where I was parked and stood near my passenger side window for a moment before finally knocking gently. I rolled it down halfway, uncertain what was coming, and she leaned down slightly and said, in a voice barely louder than a breath, "It's beautiful, what you're doing, painful but beautiful." Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving me stunned not by her kindness, but by the simple fact that someone had seen what it was not. Vengeance, not spectacle, but truth. Of course, not everyone saw it that way. By the time the service had ended and the congregation began to spill out onto the steps, a different energy had taken hold. My brother Marcus stormed out first, phone to his ear, pacing in tight, angry circles, his jaw clenched and his coat unzipped despite the cold. Amanda followed shortly after, flanked by 2 of her friends, all of them huddled close, whispering furiously, casting sharp glances toward the truck and then toward the street, clearly trying to locate me, like they knew I wouldn't be able to resist watching. And they were right, I was watching, just not with the guilt or shame they expected. I was watching the way a writer watches a scene unfold that she already knows the ending to but still finds satisfaction in witnessing beat by beat. Then came the message. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister, blunt and brimming with accusation. What the hell did you do? Are you serious with this? At church? You really think this is helping anything? I didn't reply. Not immediately. I didn't feel the need to justify, to explain what she already knew deep down but refused to acknowledge, that for years, I had swallowed every small dismissal, every half-baked excuse, every fake apology served with a side of Bible verse, and now, I wasn't asking for understanding anymore. I was simply presenting the record. Another message came, this time from my mother. Lena, please. We can talk about this privately. You didn't have to do this in front of everyone. You've made your point. But I hadn't. Not yet. Because making my point wasn't about a slideshow or a truck or public embarrassment. It was about showing them that the version of me they had conveniently edited out, year after year, had a voice, and that voice didn't need their approval to be real. A few hours later, the truck completed its run and slowly drove away, disappearing down the road like a vanishing thought they wished they could unsee. I stayed in my car unmoving, my hands curled loosely around a now-cold cup of gas station coffee, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt no urge to clean up the mess, to smooth things over, to be the one who makes it easier for everyone else to sleep at night. I wasn't there to comfort them. I wasn't there to be forgiven. That evening, when I finally walked into my apartment, I found 3 new voicemails waiting for me. One from Amanda, venomously asking how I could humiliate our family like that. One from Marcus, telling me I'd burned a bridge that didn't need to be burned. And one, the last one, from my mother, her voice shaky but still rehearsed, saying, "You've made your point, sweetheart. But don't expect to come back from this." I listened to each one twice. Then I opened my photo app, found the final image in the slideshow, the one of me smiling in the rearview mirror, reflected back at a family too busy staging their performance to notice, and I sent it to my mother with no text, no caption, no explanation. Because sometimes, silence is the clearest message of all. And in that silence, in that image, in that cold and brutal truth finally held up for all to see, was everything they had refused to hear for more than 4 decades. There's a strange kind of quiet that settles over you after you've done something irreversible, not loud or proud or even triumphant, but dense and wide, like fog curling in around the corners of your consciousness, reminding you that once a line is crossed, no matter how justified or carefully planned, you cannot walk backward across it and pretend you didn't see what you saw or feel what you felt in the moment you stepped over. That night, after the truck had finished its route and the emails, calls, and text messages slowed to a dull throb of passive-aggressive fury and wounded disbelief, I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by scraps of old photographs I had once thought about framing. Relics from birthday parties, family trips, holidays, and half-posed moments that felt too painful to keep but too significant to destroy. It was not the silence I feared, it was what the silence confirmed, that the absence had never been a mistake, that my place on the margins had been chosen for me long before I had the language to object, and now, when I finally refused to stay quiet, the only thing they could offer in return was outrage that I had dared to say the truth out loud where others could hear. The photo I sent to my mother, the one of me half smiling in the mirror, back when I still clung to the hope that maybe they'd glance up and notice I existed, remained unanswered. No reply, no acknowledgement, not even a receipt of being seen. And that, in its own way, was perfect. Because for all the chaos my gesture had stirred, for all the angry phone calls and whispers over coffee in the church's social hall and frantic attempts to control the narrative, she's bitter, she's always been like this, she just wants attention. Not one of them had thought to ask the one question that actually mattered, why now? Not how could you, not what were you thinking, but what finally pushed you past the point of staying silent. But I knew they wouldn't ask. Because asking would mean confronting the years of layered dismissal and spiritual manipulation wrapped in church language and family values, the kind of quiet cruelty that doesn't leave bruises, but builds a narrative in which your pain is not real. Only your reactions are. My entire life had been shaped by that framework, My feelings dismissed as overreactions, my opinions filtered through the lens of being difficult, my independence interpreted as rejection, my voice. When it finally trembled into something louder than a whisper, labeled ungrateful, rebellious, dramatic. And yet despite all of that, I still expected something. Maybe not an apology, God knows they'd never stoop to that, but a moment of reflection, some glimpse of understanding in the way they looked at me, some small act that said, "We didn't realize how deep it went. We didn't know we left you out this badly." But no. What I received instead was a second wave of control disguised as grace. My sister Amanda posted a family photo the following day, newly taken, perfectly filtered, all smiles once again, but this time, the caption read, "Some people choose drama. We choose love." It didn't tag me, of course, but it didn't have to. It was a bullet wrapped in glitter, and everyone knew where it was aimed. Later that afternoon, while the online chatter around the truck display began to pick up steam, mostly from local gossip pages and a few curious Reddit threads, I received one message that made me pause. It came from a girl I barely knew, someone who had gone to the same church growing up, a few years younger, always quiet, always watching. She wrote, "I remember you. You always looked like you were waiting for someone to talk to you. I saw you at youth group that night when they prayed over you and said you were lost. I've never forgotten that. I'm glad you did this." It stopped me cold, because it reminded me that even when you feel invisible, someone is always watching, and sometimes, just sometimes, your pain touches someone else's wound in a way that makes them feel seen too. And in that moment, I understood that what I had done wasn't just about me reclaiming space, it was about all the girls, all the daughters, all the women who sat in the back row of their family photos, half smiling with the kind of expression that says, "I'm here, but I know I don't belong." That evening, I drove by the church one last time. The parking lot was empty now, the brick facade unremarkable in the fading light, and for a moment, I wondered if I should feel something: guilt, sadness, fear, maybe even regret, but there was only quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you realize you no longer have to knock on a door that has never truly been open to you. I didn't go to war with my family. I didn't yell or scream or beg to be let in. I didn't vandalize their lives or curse them publicly. I simply put up a mirror, let them look, and walked away when they refused to see. And in doing that, I finally gave myself the one thing they never could, a place in the story that didn't require permission or approval. Before I went to bed that night, I posted the photo I had sent to my mother on my own page, the one of me in the car mirror, the truck behind me, the smile that held every inch of defiance and sorrow I'd spent years swallowing. No caption. No hashtags. Just the image. And within hours, the comments began to pour in. Some were confused, others supportive, a few cruel, but many, far more than I expected, spoke a truth I had barely dared to believe. "I see you. I've been there. Thank you for saying it out loud." Somewhere around midnight, my sister left me a voicemail, quieter than before, no fury in her voice this time, just the kind of exhausted hurt that leaks out when the mask slips and the practiced lines fall away. She said, "I get it now. I really do. But you didn't have to burn the whole thing down." I listened twice, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to hear her voice tremble. I wanted to know that, for once, the weight had shifted and someone else felt even a fraction of the burden I had carried alone for so long. And maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't have to burn it all down. But sometimes, when the walls have been built without you, when the rooms are filled with portraits where you never appear, when the foundation was poured from the kind of silence that leaves scars, the only way to find your breath again is to set a match to it and watch it all go up, not out of vengeance, not out of hate, but because you finally understand that survival is not the same thing as belonging. And so, no, I don't expect to be invited back. I don't expect forgiveness, and I certainly don't expect understanding. Because the truth is, I was never really in the picture. And now, finally, I'm not pretending to be.